Someone left a comment on the last video that stopped me cold. The comment asked a question so deep that I realized it deserved not just a response but an entire series. The question was this: does reincarnation always move forward in time? Or can you reincarnate into an earlier life in a block universe? Read that again, because the implications of that question will dismantle almost everything you think you know about time, about death, about reincarnation, and about the fundamental structure of reality. To answer it, we need to start with the most basic question in physics. A question that seems simple until you actually try to answer it. A question that has consumed the greatest minds in physics for 4 centuries and remains unsolved. What is time? You think you know. Everybody thinks they know. Time is the thing that clocks measure. Time is the thing that moves from past to future. Time is the thing that separates yesterday from today, from tomorrow. Time is the thing that makes you older, the thing that turns babies into adults and adults into dust. Time is obvious. Time is the most obvious thing in the universe. Except it is not. Time is one of the deepest mysteries in physics, and the deeper you look, the more mysterious it becomes. Because every major revolution in physics has forced us to radically revise our understanding of time, and each revision has moved further from common sense, further from the obvious, further from what you think you know. The first framework, Isaac Newton, 1687, Principia Mathematica. Newton described time as absolute, true and mathematical time of itself, and from its own nature, flows equably, without relation to anything external. Time flows, like a river, at a constant rate, everywhere, for everyone, regardless of what is happening in the universe. Whether the universe contains 1 particle or 1 trillion galaxies, time flows at exactly the same rate. Time is the stage on which physics happens, the unchanging background against which events unfold. Your clock and my clock tick at the same rate, always, everywhere, under all circumstances. This is the common sense view. This is what you intuitively believe. This is what feels obviously true. Your watch ticks 1 second per second. My watch ticks 1 second per second. Time is universal. Time is absolute. Time flows forward at a fixed rate and carries everything with it from past to future, birth to death, beginning to end. 1 direction, 1 speed, no exceptions. Newton was wrong. Albert Einstein destroyed absolute time in 1905 with special relativity and completed the demolition in 1915 with general relativity. These 2 theories are not speculative hypotheses. They are the most thoroughly tested theories in physics alongside quantum mechanics. Every prediction they have made has been confirmed. Every experiment designed to test them has validated them. They are the foundation of modern physics. And they say something about time that defies every intuition you have. Special relativity. If you travel at high speed relative to me, your clock ticks slower than mine. This is not a mechanical effect on the clock. The clock is not malfunctioning. The gears are not slowing down. Time itself passes more slowly for you. Every process in your body slows down. Your heartbeat, your metabolism, your neural firing, your aging, your thoughts, every chemical reaction, every biological process, everything. If you travel at 90% the speed of light, your time passes at roughly half the rate of mine. 1 year for you is 2 years for me. If you travel at 99.5% of the speed of light, 1 year for you is 10 years for me. At 99.99%, 1 year for you is over 70 years for me. You could leave Earth at 20 years old, travel for 1 year of your time at near light speed and return to find everyone you knew dead of old age. You would still be 21. They would be gone. This is not science fiction. This is measured fact. In 1971, Joseph Hafele and Richard Keating placed cesium atomic clocks on commercial aircraft that flew around the world. The clocks on the aircraft disagreed with identical clocks that remained on the ground. The disagreement matched the predictions of special relativity to within experimental error. Muons, created by cosmic rays in the upper atmosphere, travel at 99.94% of the speed of light. At that speed, time dilation extends their lifespan by a factor of about 30. Without time dilation, they would decay before reaching the ground. With time dilation, they survive the journey. We detect them at the surface. Their extended lifespan is direct experimental proof that time passes at different rates for objects in relative motion. Your phone's GPS system corrects for relativistic time dilation every single second of every single day. The GPS satellites orbit at about 14,000 kilometers per hour and sit in a weaker gravitational field than the surface. Both effects change the rate at which time passes for the satellite clocks relative to ground clocks. If the GPS system did not account for relativistic time effects, your position would drift by about 10 kilometers per day. The fact that your GPS works is daily proof that Newton was wrong about time. General relativity goes further. Gravity slows time. The stronger the gravitational field, the slower time passes. This is not a metaphor. It is a measured physical effect called gravitational time dilation. A clock on the ground floor of a building ticks measurably slower than a clock on the top floor. The difference is tiny, about 10 to the minus 16 seconds per meter of height, but it has been measured directly using optical atomic clocks by the National Institute of Standards and Technology in 2010. The precision of modern atomic clocks is sufficient to detect the time dilation caused by a difference in altitude of just 30 centimeters. Time runs at a different rate on your head than on your feet. Right now. Measurably, a clock on the surface of the Earth ticks slower than a clock in orbit. A clock near a neutron star ticks dramatically slower than a clock far away. At the event horizon of a black hole, time stops. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. The equations of general relativity predict that the rate of time passage drops to zero at the event horizon. An observer falling into a black hole would experience time normally from their own perspective. They would cross the event horizon without noticing anything unusual. But an observer watching from a distance would see the falling observer slow down, redden and fade, approaching the event horizon asymptotically, but never crossing it. From the outside perspective, the fall takes forever. Time at the event horizon relative to a distant observer has stopped completely. This is already extraordinary. Time is not absolute. Time is not universal. Time depends on velocity and gravity. Different observers experience time at genuinely different rates, and neither is wrong. Your 1 second and my 1 second are not the same length if we are moving relative to each other or sitting in different gravitational fields. There is no universal clock. There is no master time that all other times approximate. But the deepest implication of Einstein's relativity is something most people have never heard. Something that demolishes the common sense view of time more completely than anything else in physics. Something that Einstein himself considered the most important philosophical consequence of his theory. The relativity of simultaneity. In Newton's universe, two events that happen at the same time for everyone. If a bomb explodes in Tokyo and a bell rings in London at exactly the same moment, then every observer in the universe agrees that these events were simultaneous. Simultaneity is absolute. The present moment is universal. Right now means the same thing everywhere. Einstein showed this is false. Two events that are simultaneous for one observer are not simultaneous for another observer, moving at a different velocity. There is no universal now. There is no absolute present moment. What counts as now for you is different from what counts as now for me if we are moving relative to each other. And neither of us is wrong. Both perspectives are equally valid. There is no fact of the matter about which events are happening right now across the universe. The present is not a universal slice through reality. The present is observer-dependent, relative, personal. This is not a philosophical interpretation. This is a mathematical consequence of the Lorentz transformations that are the foundation of special relativity. It has been confirmed by every experiment ever conducted. It is as firmly established as any fact in physics, and it leads directly to the block universe. The argument is straightforward. If there is no universal present moment, then you cannot divide reality into the past, which has already happened and is fixed, the present, which is happening now, and the future, which has not happened yet. Because what counts as present depends on the observer. My present includes events that are in your future. Your present includes events that are in my past. If my present is real and your present is real, and they include different events, then all events must be equally real. Past events are not gone. Future events are not unborn. They exist. All of them. Always. This is the block universe. The eternalist view of time, proposed in its modern form by Hermann Minkowski, Einstein's former mathematics professor, who in 1908 unified space and time into a single four-dimensional structure called space-time. In a famous lecture, Minkowski declared that henceforth space by itself and time by itself are doomed to fade away into mere shadows, and only a kind of union of the two will preserve an independent reality. In Minkowski's formulation, the universe is not a three-dimensional space evolving through time. The universe is four-dimensional space-time, a static, eternal block containing every event that has ever happened or will ever happen. Your birth is in the block. Your death is in the block. The dinosaurs are in the block. The pyramids being built are in the block. The last star burning out is in the block. All equally real. All equally present. All existing simultaneously in the four-dimensional structure of space-time. Time in the block universe is not something that flows. Time is a dimension, like space, like up, down, and left, right, and forward, backward. You do not say that space flows from left to right. Space is just there, all of it, simultaneously. Time is just there too, all of it, simultaneously. The year 1066 is not gone. It exists at a particular location in the time dimension of the block, just as Paris exists at a particular location in the spatial dimensions. You cannot visit 1066 for the same reason you might not be able to visit Paris right now. Not because 1066 does not exist, but because you are located at a different point in the time dimension. You are here in 2026, but 1066 is there. It exists. It is real. The Battle of Hastings is happening. Right now, at that location in space-time. William the Conqueror is crossing the English Channel. The arrow is flying toward Harold's Eye. The Normans are charging. All of it. Frozen in the block. Real. Existing. Now and forever. This is not a minority view in physics. The block universe is the standard interpretation of Minkowski space-time that follows directly from special relativity. Physicists debate whether the block universe is the only consistent interpretation of relativity, but the mathematical framework of space-time as a four-dimensional block is the foundation of modern physics. General relativity is formulated entirely within this framework. The space-time manifold, the central mathematical object of Einstein's theory, is a four-dimensional structure in which time is a coordinate, not a flow. Einstein himself believed this completely. When his lifelong friend, Michel Bessot, died in March 1955, Einstein wrote in a letter to Bessot's family that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. This was not Einstein being poetic. This was Einstein stating what he believed the physics demonstrated. Einstein died just 3 weeks after writing that letter. If the block universe is correct, then Einstein is still writing that letter, and Bessot is still alive at his location in the time dimension. And so is every person who has ever lived, and every person who will ever live, all existing, all real, in the eternal, unchanging structure of space-time. Death in the block universe is not annihilation. Death is a boundary of your world line. The four-dimensional worm that is your existence through space-time has a beginning and an end, but both ends exist. The dead are not gone. They are elsewhere in the block, like a city you have left behind but that continues to exist after your departure. Now, you might object, and you should object, because the block universe violates every intuition you have about time. It feels wrong, deeply wrong. Time obviously flows. The past obviously is gone. The future obviously has not happened yet. I remember yesterday. I do not remember tomorrow. I can affect the future, but I cannot affect the past. Things change. Things happen. Events unfold. Causes precede effects. The universe is not frozen. It is dynamic, active, evolving. The block universe says the entire movie already exists, every frame already real. But I experience the movie one frame at a time. I experience time passing. I experience now as special. I experience the flow. How can the flow be an illusion when the flow is the most immediate feature of my experience? This objection is powerful, and it connects to the deepest unsolved problem in the physics of time, the arrow of time. If the block universe is static and all moments are equally real, then why do we experience time as flowing in one direction? Why does the present feel special? Why does the past feel gone and the future feel open? Why do we remember the past but not the future? Why do we age from young to old and not from old to young? Why does the arrow of time point in one direction? The standard answer in physics is the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy increases. Entropy is a measure of disorder of the number of microscopic configurations consistent with a given macroscopic state. A neatly arranged room has low entropy because there are few arrangements that count as neat. A messy room has high entropy because there are vastly more arrangements that count as messy. The universe moves from states of lower entropy to states of higher entropy simply because there are overwhelmingly more high entropy states than low entropy states. It is not that the universe is driven toward disorder by some force. It is that disorder is overwhelmingly more probable than order. An egg can break because there are billions of ways for an egg to be broken, and only one way for it to be intact. A broken egg does not spontaneously reassemble because the probability of all the molecules randomly returning to the intact configuration is astronomically small, not zero. Just so close to zero that it has never happened in the history of the universe and never will. Milk mixes into coffee because there are far more mixed states than unmixed states. The mixed coffee does not spontaneously unmix for the same statistical reason. This asymmetry, the relentless increase of entropy, is the thermodynamic arrow of time. The past is the direction of lower entropy. The future is the direction of higher entropy. We remember the past because our memory records are physical structures that were created by interactions with the lower entropy past state. They carry information about the past because the past had lower entropy and therefore more structure. We do not remember the future because the future has higher entropy, and our brain's recording mechanisms are correlated with the lower entropy direction. The experience of time flowing is the experience of entropy increasing. The direction of time is the direction of increasing disorder. The feeling that the past is fixed and the future is open is the feeling that the past had lower entropy, which constrains it more, and the future has higher entropy, which leaves it more uncertain. But here is the critical point that almost nobody discusses. The point that changes everything about the physics of time and consciousness and reincarnation. The thermodynamic arrow of time is not fundamental. It is emergent. It is statistical. It is a property of macroscopic systems containing enormous numbers of particles, not a property of the fundamental laws of physics themselves. The second law of thermodynamics is not a law in the same sense as Newton's laws or Maxwell's equations or the Schrödinger equation. It is a statistical tendency, an overwhelmingly probable tendency, but a tendency, not a law. The fundamental laws of physics do not contain an arrow of time. Every fundamental equation of physics is time symmetric. Newton's second law, F equals ma, works the same if you replace t with minus t. Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism are time symmetric. Einstein's field equations of general relativity are time symmetric. The laws of the strong nuclear force are time symmetric. The laws of the weak nuclear force have a tiny time asymmetry through CP violation, but even this is converted to full CPT symmetry when you also reverse charge and parity. And most critically, most importantly, most profoundly, for everything that follows in this series, the Schrödinger equation, the fundamental equation of quantum mechanics, is perfectly time symmetric. Let me say that again because it is the single most important fact for the question that started this series. The Schrödinger equation is time symmetric. Completely, perfectly, without exception. If you take any quantum process, any evolution of any quantum system, and reverse the direction of time, the mathematics works identically. The equation does not know which direction time runs. It does not care. There is no arrow built into it. There is no preferred direction. Forward and backward are mathematically equivalent. The quantum world has no past and no future in the fundamental equations. It has only configurations related by time-symmetric evolution. The arrow of time that you experience every second of every day, the feeling that time flows from past to future, the certainty that causes precede effects, the conviction that yesterday is gone and tomorrow has not happened, this arrow does not exist in the fundamental equation that governs the quantum world. It emerges at the macroscopic level, from thermodynamics, from entropy, from the special low entropy initial conditions of the Big Bang. But at the deepest level, at the level of quantum mechanics, at the level where the fundamental laws of the universe are written, at the level where reality is most accurately described, time has no preferred direction. Past and future are symmetric. The arrow is an illusion, a persistent illusion, as Einstein said, but an illusion nonetheless. This means something extraordinary for the question that started this series. If consciousness is quantum information, as the Orch-OR model proposes, and as the quantum biology evidence supports, and if quantum information obeys the Schrödinger equation, which is time symmetric, then there is no fundamental physical reason why quantum consciousness information must propagate only forward in time. The arrow of time that we experience is thermodynamic. It is emergent. It is statistical. It is not written into the fundamental laws. At the quantum level, where consciousness might operate, where microtubule quantum states might undergo orchestrated objective reduction, where the informational pattern that constitutes awareness might be encoded, the future and the past are equally accessible directions. The Schrödinger equation does not distinguish between them. The quantum information can evolve forward or backward with equal mathematical validity. The question from the comment was whether reincarnation can move backward in time, and the physics gives an answer that is both precise and unsettling. There is no fundamental law that prevents it. The Schrödinger equation does not discriminate between temporal directions. Unitarity conserves information regardless of the direction of time. If consciousness is quantum information, then the conservation law that protects it applies equally in both temporal directions. The pattern that constitutes your consciousness could in principle be conserved backward into 1200 CE as easily as forward into 2800 CE. The thermodynamic arrow says you will experience time moving forward. But the thermodynamic arrow is emergent, not fundamental. At the quantum level where consciousness might be encoded, the arrow does not exist. But this is only the beginning, because the block universe does something even more radical to the concept of reincarnation, something that the original commenter might not have anticipated. If all moments of time are equally real, then the question is not just whether consciousness can transfer backward in time. The question is, whether the entire concept of consciousness transferring through time is the wrong framework. In the block universe, all lives exist simultaneously. Your life in the 21st century, the life of a farmer in medieval China, the life of a weaver in ancient Egypt, the life of a physicist in the 23rd century, all coexisting in the four-dimensional block, all equally real, all equally present, none more now than any other. If consciousness is fundamental to reality as the quantum evidence suggests, if consciousness is not produced by individual brains, but is a feature of the universe itself, as panpsychism and IIT and Ortshaw and the contemplative traditions all propose in different ways, then maybe consciousness does not transfer from life to life through time at all. Maybe the very idea of transfer assumes the flow model of time that Einstein said is an illusion. Maybe in the block universe, consciousness is not something that moves from one life to another. Maybe consciousness is the block itself. The fundamental awareness that underlies all of space-time. And individual lives are different perspectives, different windows, different focal points through which the one consciousness experiences its own structure from the inside. You are a window. The medieval farmer is a window. The Egyptian weaver is a window. The 23rd century physicist is a window. All open simultaneously, all looking out from the same awareness. None first, none last. Because first and last require a flow of time, and in the block universe there is no flow. This changes everything about how we think about reincarnation. It changes the meaning of karma. If all lives exist simultaneously, then karma is not a force that carries consequences from one life to the next through time. Karma might be a structural relationship between different lives within the block, a pattern of information that connects different world lines, a topological feature of consciousness space-time rather than a causal chain through linear time. It changes the meaning of death. Death in the block universe is not the end of consciousness. It is a boundary of one world line. One window closes, but every other window remains open, including windows that from your thermodynamic perspective are in the past. It changes the meaning of birth. Birth is not the beginning of consciousness. It is the opening of a new window, a new focal point, a new perspective that consciousness has of itself. The universe, according to Einstein, is a four-dimensional block in which all events coexist. Time, according to the Schrödinger equation, has no preferred direction at the fundamental level. Consciousness, according to quantum mechanics, might be woven into the fabric of reality at the deepest level. Put these three facts together, and the implications are staggering, not for some hypothetical future physics, for our understanding of reality right now, based on the theories we already have, the theories that are already confirmed, the mathematics that is already proven. And we have not even gotten to the experimental evidence yet, the quantum eraser experiments that demonstrate what looks like retrocausality, the Wheeler delayed choice experiments that show the present measurement can determine the past trajectory of a photon, the transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics developed by John Cramer, in which quantum events involve offer waves traveling forward in time and confirmation waves traveling backward in time, the Aharonov, Bergman, Leibowitz framework for quantum mechanics that treats past and future boundary conditions symmetrically. The evidence is there. Published in Physical Review, Letters and Nature and Science. Peer-reviewed. Confirmed by experiment. Debated by serious physicists at serious institutions. The common-sense view of time in which the past is gone, the future has not happened, and consciousness moves forward on a one-way conveyor belt from birth to death is not supported by physics. Every major development in 20th and 21st century physics has undermined it. Relativity destroyed absolute time. The block universe eliminated the flow of time. Quantum mechanics eliminated the arrow of time at the fundamental level, and quantum consciousness theory eliminated the restriction that awareness must follow the thermodynamic arrow. What replaces the common sense view is stranger and more beautiful and more terrifying than anything common sense could imagine. And we are just getting started. The Schrödinger equation does not care which direction time runs. This is a mathematical fact, but mathematics is not physics. The question is whether nature actually uses this time symmetry, whether there are real physical processes in which the future influences the past, whether retrocausality, the backward flow of causation from future to past, is not just mathematically possible but physically real. The answer, according to a series of extraordinary experiments, is yes. The double-slit experiment is the most famous experiment in quantum mechanics. Richard Feynman said it contains the only mystery of quantum mechanics. The setup is simple. Fire particles one at a time at a barrier with two slits. Detect the particles on a screen behind the barrier. If you do not measure which slit the particle goes through, you get an interference pattern on the screen. The pattern of bright and dark bands that proves the particle traveled through both slits simultaneously as a wave. If you do measure which slit the particle goes through, the interference pattern disappears. You get two clumps on the screen. The particle went through one slit or the other as a particle. Measurement destroys the superposition. Observation determines reality. This is the standard quantum mystery. The delayed choice quantum eraser takes this mystery and makes it terrifying. It takes the standard quantum weirdness and adds a dimension that strikes at the very foundation of causality, at the assumption that causes must precede their effects, at the assumption that the past is fixed and the future is open, at the assumption that what has already happened cannot be changed by what happens later. The experiment was proposed by Marlon Scully and Kai Druhl in 1982 and first performed by Yoon Ho Kim and colleagues in 1999 at the University of Maryland. The setup is an elaborate and ingenious extension of the double-slit experiment using entangled photon pairs produced by spontaneous parametric down conversion in a beta barium borate crystal. A photon is sent toward the double slit. After it passes through the slits, it encounters the crystal that converts it into two entangled photons traveling in different directions. One photon, the signal photon, travels to the main detector D0, where its position is recorded. The other photon, the idler photon, travels through a separate and more complex optical system involving beam splitters and mirrors that routes it to one of four detectors, D1, D2, D3 or D4. Here is the critical feature that makes this experiment unlike anything else in physics. The optical system for the idler photon can be configured in two ways, depending on which detector the idler photon reaches. If the idler photon reaches detector D3 or D4, it carries which path information. You can determine which slit the original photon went through by seeing which detector the idler hit. In this case, when you look at the corresponding signal photons on detector D0, they show no interference pattern. Particle behavior: two clumps. The photon went through one slit. If the idler photon reaches detector D1 or D2, its which path information has been erased by combining the two possible paths at a beam splitter, making it fundamentally impossible to determine which slit the original photon went through. In this case, the corresponding signal photons on D0 show a clear interference pattern. Wave behavior: bright and dark bands. The photon went through both slits. This is already strange. Whether the signal photon behaves as a wave or a particle depends on what happens to the idler photon in a completely separate part of the laboratory. But the truly shocking feature is the timing. The signal photon hits the main detector before the idler photon reaches the beam splitter, where its which path information is erased or preserved. The signal photon has already been recorded. Its position on the detector is already fixed, already measured, already a fact about the past. And then afterward, the experimenter decides whether to erase the idler photon's which path information or preserve it. And this later decision determines whether the already recorded signal photons form an interference pattern or not. Let me say that again. A decision made after the signal photon has been detected determines the pattern that the signal photon's detection contributes to. The future choice affects the past measurement. The effect precedes the cause. The consequence comes before the action. Retrocausality. The results have been confirmed by multiple independent groups. The experiment is not controversial in the sense that the data is disputed. The data is clear. What is disputed is the interpretation. Many physicists argue that the delayed choice quantum eraser does not demonstrate true retrocausality because the interference pattern is only visible after the idler photon data is used to sort the signal photon detections into subsets. You cannot see the interference pattern in the total signal photon data alone. You only see it when you select the subset of signal photons whose idler partners had their witch path information erased. This sorting happens after both photons are detected, so the argument goes no. Information travels backward in time. The pattern was always there, hidden in the correlations. The later measurement does not change the past. It reveals a structure in the past that was already present. This interpretation is legitimate, but it has a cost. The cost is accepting that the correlations between signal and idler photons were established at the moment of entanglement before either photon was measured. The entanglement encoded the future measurement choice into the past event. The future is already written into the past through quantum correlations. This is not retrocausality in the sense of sending a message backward in time, but it is a form of temporal non-locality, a connection between future and past that transcends the ordinary arrow of time. The future and the past are entangled, correlated, connected in a way that classical physics says is impossible. John Archibald Wheeler proposed an even more dramatic thought experiment. Wheeler was one of the most important physicists of the 20th century. He coined the terms black hole and wormhole. He was Feynman's doctoral advisor. He worked on the Manhattan Project. He spent his later career exploring the foundations of quantum mechanics with a depth and creativity that few have matched. Wheeler's delayed choice experiment, published in 1978 and elaborated in 1983, asks a simple question. When does a photon decide whether to be a wave or a particle? In the standard double-slit experiment, you choose before the photon reaches the slits whether to measure witch path information or not. If you measure, the photon is a particle. If you do not measure, the photon is a wave. But Wheeler proposed choosing after the photon has already passed through the slits. The cosmic version makes this vivid. A quasar, billions of light years away, emits a photon. A massive galaxy between the quasar and Earth acts as a gravitational lens bending the photon's path. The photon can take two routes around the galaxy, left or right. If we set up our detector on Earth to measure which path the photon took, the photon will have travelled along one path, a particle. If we set up our detector to create interference between the two paths, the photon will have travelled along both paths simultaneously, a wave. We make this choice now, today, on Earth, and our choice determines what the photon did billions of years ago. Whether it went left or right or both around the galaxy, our present measurement determines the photon's past trajectory. This was confirmed experimentally in two landmark experiments. Jacques and colleagues published results in Science in 2007 using a terrestrial version with an interferometer and a quantum random number generator that made the measurement choice after the photon was already inside the apparatus. They demonstrated that the choice of measurement made after the photon entered the interferometer determined whether the photon exhibited wave or particle behavior inside the interferometer. The delayed choice worked exactly as Wheeler predicted. The present determined the past. In 2017, the cosmic version was actually performed. A team led by researchers in Italy used light from quasars billions of light years away, lensed by intervening galaxies, to conduct a real cosmic delayed choice experiment. The photons had been travelling for billions of years. The choice of whether to measure which path or interference was made when the photons arrived at the telescope. And that choice now, in 2017, determined what the photon did billions of years ago at the gravitational lens. The experiment confirmed Wheeler's prediction with cosmic scale separations. A choice made on Earth in the 21st century shaped the trajectory of a photon that began its journey when the Earth did not yet exist. Wheeler himself drew a radical conclusion from this. He proposed what he called the participatory universe, the idea that observers are not passive spectators watching a pre-existing reality unfold like an audience at a movie. Observers participate in creating reality, including past reality, including reality that existed before any observers existed. Wheeler wrote that we are participators in bringing into being not only the near and here, but the far away and long ago. We live in a universe of participation. The measurement choices we make today participate in shaping the physical reality of the distant past. The universe does not have a definite history that we merely discover after the fact. The history is created retroactively in part by the observations made in the present. The past is not closed, not finished, not settled. The past is still being determined by what happens now. This is not mysticism disguised as physics. This is mainstream physics published in the most prestigious journals, debated at the most rigorous conferences and confirmed by experiment. The interpretation is debated. The data is not. This connects directly to the block universe. In the block universe, all moments of time are equally real. The past is as real as the present. But Wheeler's delayed choice experiment suggests that the past is not fixed independently of present observation. The present participates in determining what the past was. In the block universe, this means the block is not a static pre-existing structure that we merely discover. The block is being shaped by observations at every point within it. Every observation at every moment participates in determining the structure of the entire block. Past, present and future are mutually determining, co-arising, interdependent. The transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics, developed by John Cramer at the University of Washington in 1986, provides a mathematical framework for exactly this kind of temporal bidirectionality. In the transactional interpretation, every quantum event involves two waves, an offer wave that travels forward in time from the source, and a confirmation wave that travels backward in time from the absorber. The quantum event, the emission and absorption of a photon, for example, is a transaction that is completed when the forward-traveling offer wave and the backward-traveling confirmation wave meet and form a standing wave. Pattern. The transaction is atemporal. It does not happen at a particular moment. It involves the entire path of the photon, from emission to absorption, including the future absorber, sending a wave backward in time to the past emitter. Cramer's interpretation is mathematically equivalent to standard quantum mechanics. It makes the same predictions. It produces the same experimental results, but it makes the time symmetry of quantum mechanics explicit. It treats the backward in time confirmation wave as physically real, not as a mathematical trick, as a real wave propagating from future to past that participates in determining the outcome of the quantum event. The confirmation wave is derived from the complex conjugate of the wave function. In standard quantum mechanics, the wave function psi evolves forward in time. Its complex conjugate psi star evolves backward in time. Standard interpretations treat psi star as a mathematical convenience. Cramer treats it as a physically real wave, and the mathematics supports this interpretation. The conjugate wave function is a solution to the Schrödinger equation evolving in the reverse time direction. It is as mathematically legitimate as the forward wave function. Treating it as physically real is not ad hoc. It is taking the mathematics seriously. Aharonov and colleagues developed a related and profoundly important framework called the two-state vector formalism, first published in 1964 by Aharonov, Bergman and Lebowitz, and developed extensively in the decades since, particularly by Aharonov and Weidmann. In standard quantum mechanics, a quantum system is described by a single state vector that evolves forward in time from the initial preparation. This forward evolving state encodes all information about the system's past. It says nothing about its future. In the two-state vector formalism, a quantum system is described not by one state vector, but by two. One, evolving forward from the initial preparation. One, evolving backward from the final measurement. The complete description of the quantum system at any intermediate time requires both vectors. The past boundary condition and the future boundary condition jointly determine what happens at intermediate times. The past and the future jointly determine the present. This is not merely a philosophical interpretation, it is a mathematical formalism that makes specific predictions. Predictions that differ from those of standard single-vector quantum mechanics in the domain of weak measurements. Weak measurements are a revolutionary experimental technique pioneered by Aharonov and Weidmann, in which a measuring device interacts so gently with a quantum system that it extracts only a tiny amount of information without significantly disturbing the quantum state. The result of a single weak measurement is nearly random, but when weak measurement results are averaged over many identically prepared and post-selected systems, they yield a quantity called the weak value, and weak values can be strange. They can lie outside the normal range of the measured observable. A spin, 1-2 particle, can have a weak value of spin equal to 100. This is impossible for a strong measurement, but it is predicted by the two-state vector formalism and has been confirmed experimentally. The confirmation came in a series of stunning experiments. In 2011, Sacha Coxis and colleagues at the University of Toronto used weak measurements to reconstruct the average trajectories of single photons in a double-slit experiment. The results were published in Science and showed for the first time what photons actually do between emission and detection. The trajectories matched the predictions of the two-state vector formalism. In 2013, Denkmeyer and colleagues at the Vienna University of Technology performed a weak measurement experiment with neutrons that confirmed the predictions of the two-state vector formalism in a way that standard quantum mechanics could not explain without invoking both past and future boundary conditions. The future measurement result physically affected the neutron's properties at an earlier time. This was measured, published in Nature Communications, replicated. The implications are direct. If the future boundary condition affects the quantum system at intermediate times, then the future physically influences the present, and by extension, the present physically influences the past. This is not a philosophical speculation about the meaning of quantum mechanics. This is an experimental result confirmed by measurement in world-class laboratories. The two-state vector formalism works. Its predictions are confirmed, and its predictions require that the future participates in determining the present. What does all of this mean for consciousness and reincarnation in the block universe? The implications unfold in layers, each more radical than the last. First layer. If consciousness is quantum information, then consciousness participates in the time symmetry of quantum mechanics. The Schrödinger equation does not restrict quantum information to forward propagation. The transactional interpretation treats backward in time propagation as physically real. Wheeler's delayed choice experiments show that present observations influence past physical reality. Aharonov's two-state vector formalism shows that future boundary conditions affect present quantum states. The experimental evidence supports temporal bidirectionality at the quantum level. Consciousness, if it is quantum, does not have to flow forward in time. Second layer. In the block universe, consciousness does not flow at all. Flow requires a preferred direction. The block has no preferred direction. All moments exist equally. The experience of flow is the thermodynamic arrow experienced from within the block, but the thermodynamic arrow is emergent. At the quantum level, there is no arrow. If consciousness operates at the quantum level, then the fundamental consciousness, the consciousness that the filter model says the brain receives rather than produces, is not flowing through the block. It is present throughout the block. At every point, at every time, at every location, in four-dimensional space-time. Now apply this to the reincarnation question in the block universe. If all moments of time are equally real, and if consciousness is quantum information that obeys time-symmetric equations, and if quantum events involve both forward and backward temporal propagation, then the concept of reincarnation as a strictly forward-in-time process is a projection of the thermodynamic arrow onto a phenomenon that might operate at the quantum level where the thermodynamic arrow does not apply. In the block universe, reincarnation, if it occurs, does not need to follow a linear temporal sequence. The quantum information pattern that constitutes consciousness could in principle become associated with a biological system at any point in space-time, forward in time from the perspective of the thermodynamic arrow, backward in time from the same perspective, or at a completely different location in the time dimension of the block. The block does not have a preferred direction. The fundamental equations do not have a preferred direction. Only the thermodynamic arrow imposes a direction, and the thermodynamic arrow is emergent, not fundamental. This does not mean that you will reincarnate into the past. It means that the very concept of before and after, when applied to consciousness at the quantum level, might not be meaningful. In the block universe, your life and the life you might reincarnate into both exist. Both are real. Both are present in the block. The relationship between them is not temporal sequence, but informational connection. Quantum correlation, entanglement across the time dimension of space-time. The way two entangled particles are connected across spatial distance, two lives might be connected across temporal distance. Not because information traveled from one to the other through time, because they are entangled in the four-dimensional structure of the block. This reframes every piece of evidence from the reincarnation research in a radically new light. Consider the children who remember past lives through the lens of the block universe and temporal quantum correlations. Chanai Chumalaiwong in Thailand, who at age 3 described the life of a teacher named Bua Kai Lornak, who was shot while cycling to school. He named the school, the village, the wife, the parents, the children, all verified. 2 birthmarks matching the entry and exit wounds of the fatal gunshot confirmed by autopsy records. In the standard reincarnation framework, these memories and these birthmarks are explained by a soul or consciousness pattern that transferred forward through time, from the deceased teacher to the child born years later. A linear causal chain. Teacher dies. Information transfers through time. Child is born carrying the information. Birthmarks form as physical impressions of the previous death. But in the block universe framework, the teacher's life exists at one location in space-time, and the child's life exists at another location. Both are equally real. Both exist simultaneously in the four-dimensional block. The teacher is not dead in the block universe. The teacher exists at coordinates in space-time that are earlier on the time axis than the child's coordinates. The connection between them is not a causal chain running forward through time. It is a quantum correlation in the four-dimensional structure of space-time. The information does not travel from teacher to child. The information exists in both locations because the two systems are quantumly entangled across the time dimension. James Leininger in Louisiana, who at age 2 described being a World War II pilot named James Houston Jr., who flew a Corsair off the USS Natoma Bay and was shot down by Japanese fire over Iwo Jima on the 3rd of March 1945. Every detail verified. In the block universe, James Houston Jr. exists at space-time coordinates in 1945. James Leininger exists at space-time coordinates in the early 2000s. The quantum correlations between the two lives connect 2 points in the block. not through a signal traveling forward through 55 years of time. Through entanglement in the four-dimensional structure, the information is non-locally correlated, present at both locations, not because it was transmitted, but because the two world lines are entangled. And here is the key insight. If the connection is quantum correlation rather than temporal transfer, then there is no reason the connection must respect the thermodynamic arrow. A child in 2020 could have quantum correlations with a person who lived in 1940. But equally, and this is the radical implication, a child born in 1940 could have quantum correlations with a person who will live in 2020. Or a person who lived in 1200 could have quantum correlations with someone in 3500 BCE. The quantum correlations in the block do not care about the direction of time. They are symmetric. They connect locations in the block regardless of their temporal ordering from the perspective of the thermodynamic arrow. The arrow says time goes forward. The quantum correlations say the block has no preferred direction. This is what the physics allows, not what the physics proves. The distinction is critical and I will not blur it. The physics provides a framework in which backward in time and non-temporal reincarnation is possible. It does not prove that reincarnation occurs in any direction. It provides a structure in which the question makes physical sense, in which it is not ruled out by the laws of physics, in which the common sense objection that you cannot go backward in time is shown to be based on a misunderstanding of what time is at the fundamental level. The speculative leap from quantum eraser experiments and weak measurements to reincarnation across the block universe is enormous. The quantum eraser involves individual photons in carefully controlled laboratory conditions. Reincarnation, if it occurs, involves the integrated quantum information of 86 billion neurons transferred across macroscopic distances in space-time. The scale difference is staggering. The extrapolation is vast. Intellectual honesty requires stating this clearly, but intellectual honesty also requires stating that the extrapolation is in the right direction. Every piece of evidence for retrocausality or temporal quantum correlations strengthens the case that time at the quantum level is not what common sense assumes. Every confirmation of the two-state vector formalism strengthens the case that the future and past are mutually determining. Every successful delayed choice experiment strengthens the case that the present participates in shaping the past. The arrow of time that seems so absolute, so obvious, so unquestionable, is an emergent macroscopic phenomenon. At the quantum level it does not exist. And if consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, then consciousness is not bound by it. The commenter asked whether reincarnation can move backward in time in the block universe. The physics answers this question in stages. First, the Schrödinger equation is time symmetric, so quantum information can propagate in either temporal direction. Second, the transactional interpretation and two-state vector formalism treat backward in time propagation as physically real and experimentally confirmed. Third, Wheeler's delayed choice experiments demonstrate that present choices influence past physical reality. Fourth, in the block universe all moments coexist, so the concept of forward and backward is observer-dependent, not fundamental. The deepest answer is that in the block universe the question of direction might not apply at all. All directions are equally real. All connections are equally possible. The arrow of time that makes backward seem impossible is a thermodynamic arrow imposed by the low-entropy initial conditions of the Big Bang, not a fundamental feature of the quantum laws that might govern consciousness. At the quantum level, where consciousness might operate, where the informational pattern that constitutes your awareness might be encoded, the arrow does not exist. And in the block universe, where all moments coexist, where your birth and your death and every moment between them are equally real, the very concept of direction through time is an artifact of the observer's thermodynamic perspective, not a feature of reality itself. The question is not whether reincarnation goes forward or backward, The question is whether the concepts of forward and backward apply to consciousness at all, and the physics increasingly suggests they do not. But the traditions had something to say about this too, long before Einstein, long before quantum mechanics, long before the block universe. The contemplative traditions of every major civilization developed concepts of time that are eerily consistent with what modern physics has discovered. Cyclical time, eternal now, the dissolution of past and future in the present moment of enlightenment. They mapped this territory from the inside while physics mapped it from the outside, and the maps are converging. 4,000 years before Einstein wrote that the distinction between past, present and future is a stubbornly persistent illusion. Before Minkowski fused space and time into a four-dimensional block, before the Schrödinger equation revealed that the fundamental laws of physics have no preferred direction of time, before Wheeler showed that the present participates in determining the past, before Aharonov demonstrated that the future shapes the present, before any of this, the contemplative traditions of humanity arrived at the same conclusions. Not through mathematics, not through experiment, through the direct investigation of consciousness from the inside, through thousands of years of disciplined observation of the nature of time as it appears to awareness when the noise of ordinary thinking falls away and the mind becomes still enough to see what is actually there rather than what it assumes is there. And what they found was that linear time is an illusion, that the past is not gone, that the future is not unborn, that the present moment contains everything, that the flow of time is a construction of the mind, not a feature of reality, that eternity is not a very long time but the absence of time altogether, that the deepest level of reality is timeless. Every major contemplative tradition on earth arrived at this conclusion independently, separated by thousands of miles, separated by thousands of years, using different languages, different conceptual frameworks, different metaphysical assumptions, and yet converging on the same fundamental insight. Time, as we ordinarily experience it, is not what it appears to be. Hinduism developed the most elaborate cosmology of time in the ancient world. The Hindu concept of time is cyclical, not linear. Time does not flow from a beginning to an end. Time cycles, repeats, turns like a wheel. The basic unit is the yuga. There are 4 yugas. Satya Yuga, the age of truth, lasting 1,728,000 years. Treta Yuga, lasting 1,296,000 years. Dvapara Yuga, lasting 864,000 years. Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, lasting 432,000 years. We are currently in Kali Yuga. These 4 yugas together form one Mahayuga, lasting 4,320,000 years. 1,000 Mahayugas constitute one Kalpa, which is one day of Brahma, lasting 4.32 billion years. One night of Brahma is equally long. Brahma's life spans 100 Brahma years. At the end of Brahma's life, the entire universe dissolves into the unmanifest. Then a new Brahma is born and the cycle begins again. The cycles never end. There is no ultimate beginning, no ultimate end. Time is an infinite wheel, turning through infinite cycles of creation and dissolution. The numbers are staggering in their scale, but the deeper teaching is not about the numbers. The deeper teaching is about the nature of time itself. The Bhagavad Gita chapter 11 describes Arjuna's vision of Krishna's universal form. Arjuna sees all of time simultaneously, all beings rushing into Krishna's mouths like moths into a flame. Past, present, and future warriors, already dead, already living, not yet born, all visible at once in the timeless vision of the divine. Krishna tells Arjuna that he has already slain the warriors. The battle has already been decided. Arjuna is merely the instrument of what has already occurred in the timeless reality that Krishna represents. The future is already present. The past is still happening. Time in Krishna's vision is not a sequence, it is a totality, everything at once. Arjuna sees the block universe 2,500 years before Minkowski described it mathematically. The Mandukya Upanishad's description of Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness, is explicitly described as timeless. Turiya is not in time. Turiya is the ground from which the experience of time arises. In Turiya, there is no sequence, no before and after, no past and future. There is only the eternal present, not the moving present of ordinary experience that slides from moment to moment along the time axis. The eternal present, the present that contains all moments, the now that is not a thin slice between past and future, but the totality of reality, experienced without the filter of temporal sequencing. Shankara, the great Advaita Vedanta philosopher, wrote in the 8th century that time is Maya. Time is the illusion that makes the one reality appear as many events happening in sequence. When Maya is penetrated, when ignorance is removed, time dissolves. The realized sage lives in what Shankara calls the eternal now, not a moment in time. The absence of time, the direct experience of reality as it is, without the overlay of temporal construction. Shankara's eternal now is structurally identical to the block universe's denial of temporal flow. Both say that the passage of time is not a feature of reality, but a feature of the observer's limited perspective. Remove the limitation, and time reveals itself as something very different from what it appeared to be. Buddhism approaches time with characteristic precision and radicality. The Buddhist analysis of time begins with a doctrine called Keshanikavada, momentariness, the teaching that all phenomena exist for only a single moment. There is no duration. Nothing persists through time. What you call a self, what you call an object, what you call anything, is a series of momentary events arising and passing away in rapid succession. The candle flame that appears to persist is actually a series of different flames, each lasting only an instant, each causing the next. There is no flame that endures through time. There is only a sequence of momentary flames, each of which comes into being and passes away in the same instant. This sounds like it contradicts the block universe. If everything is momentary, then time seems to be a sequence of arising and passing, a flow, an inherently temporal process. But look deeper, much deeper, because the Buddhist analysis of momentariness leads to a conclusion that is far more radical than simple impermanence. Nagarjuna, the great Madhyamaka philosopher of the 2nd century CE, subjected time itself to his dialectical analysis in a way that anticipates modern physics by nearly 2,000 years. In the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental verses of the Middle Way, Nagarjuna devoted an entire chapter to the examination of time. His argument proceeds with logical precision. He asks whether the present and the future depend on the past. If they do, then the present and future exist in the past. Because a thing that depends on something else must in some sense be present where its foundation is. But if the present and future exist in the past, then they are not really future and present, they are past. And if they do not depend on the past, then they exist independently. But nothing in Buddhism exists independently. Everything arises dependently. Nagarjuna then examines the past. The past does not exist because it has ceased. The future does not exist because it has not yet arisen. And the present cannot exist independently because the present is defined only in relation to past and future. Take away past and future, and the concept of present has no meaning. It is like trying to define left without right, or up without down. The present depends on past and future for its definition. But past and future do not exist, therefore the present, which depends on non-existent things for its definition, also does not exist as an inherent feature of reality. Time is empty, shunya, devoid of inherent existence, devoid of self-nature, devoid of the independent reality that our ordinary experience attributes to it. This does not mean nothing happens. Events occur, experience flows, change is perceived. But the temporal framework that we impose on events, the division into past, present, and future, the ordering of events into a sequence, the arrow that seems to point from earlier to later, this framework is a mental construction, a conceptual overlay, not a feature of reality itself. Reality as it is in itself, svabhava shunya, is empty of temporal ordering. Events occur, but their temporal sequence is not intrinsic to them. It is added by the perceiving mind. It is conventional truth, samvriti satya, not ultimate truth, paramartha satya. This is remarkably close to what the block universe says. In the block universe, all events exist, but their ordering into past, present and future is observer-dependent. The relativity of simultaneity, proved by Einstein and confirmed by every experiment, means there is no objective temporal ordering of space-like separated events. The ordering depends on the observer's velocity, on the observer's reference frame, on the observer's perspective. Nagarjuna arrives at a structurally similar conclusion through purely dialectical analysis of the concept of time itself. The ordering is empty, not inherent, not objective, dependent on perspective, constructed by the mind rather than discovered in reality. The Zen tradition within Buddhism pushes this insight to its most radical expression. The concept of Nikon, the eternal, now is central to Zen practice and Zen philosophy. But it was Dogen Zenji, the 13th century Japanese Zen master, who developed the most sophisticated philosophical analysis of time in the entire Buddhist tradition. In his masterwork, Shobogenzo Dogen devoted an entire fascicle to Uji being time. His teaching is extraordinary in its subtlety, its paradoxical depth, and its stunning resonance with modern physics. Dogen argued that time does not pass like a river flowing from past to future, carrying beings along with it. This is the ordinary view, the common sense view, the view that the block universe demolishes. Dogen demolishes it from the inside through contemplative insight rather than mathematical physics, but the demolition is equally thorough. For Dogen, time is not a container in which things exist. Time is the things themselves. Mountains are time, rivers are time, you are time. The pine tree is the time of the pine tree. The bamboo is the time of the bamboo. Every being, every phenomenon, every moment of experience is a complete expression of being time. Not a thing in time, a thing that is time. Time does not flow past beings. Beings are time expressing itself. And because each being is time, each moment contains the entire universe. The present moment is not a point on a timeline, a thin slice between the thick past and the thick future. The present moment is the totality of existence, manifesting as this particular configuration of being time. All past moments and all future moments are contained in this present moment, not as memories or anticipations, as the full reality of being time expressing itself completely in every instant. Dogen wrote that firewood does not become ash. This statement is almost incomprehensible from the ordinary perspective. Of course, firewood becomes ash. You burn it, and it turns to ash. This is the sequential temporal view. But Dogen says no. Firewood is firewood. It occupies its own position in being time. Ash is ash. It occupies its own position in being time. Firewood has a before and an after. Ash has a before and an after. But the before and after are within each being, not between beings. The firewood does not transition into ash. Both exist completely in their own being time. The relationship between them is not temporal transformation, but structural relationship. This is almost exactly the block universe description. In the block universe, the firewood exists at its space-time coordinates, and the ash exists at its space-time coordinates. The firewood does not become the ash. Both exist. The firewood is firewood at its location. The ash is ash at its location. The relationship between them is not temporal transformation, but structural relationship within the four-dimensional block. Dogen arrived at this insight through Zen practice in 13th century Japan. Minkowski arrived at it through mathematics in early 20th century Germany. The structural convergence is extraordinary. Islam presents a complex and multi-layered understanding of time that is far more sophisticated than most Western commentators recognize. The Quran uses two primary terms for time. Zaman is ordinary time, sequential time, the time of clocks and calendars and human experience. Da is a different concept entirely. Da is absolute time, eternal time, time beyond time. In a famous hadith, the Prophet Muhammad says, "Do not curse Da, for indeed Allah is Da." This identifies God with the totality of time, not with a being who exists within time. With time itself in its absolute, eternal, unconditioned form. God is not in time. God is time in its deepest nature. The concept of barzakh is particularly relevant to the reincarnation and block universe question. Barzakh literally means barrier or isthmus, a liminal space between two realms. In Islamic eschatology, it refers to the realm between death and resurrection, the intermediate state, the place where the soul exists after the death of the body and before the final judgment. The soul in barzakh is conscious, it perceives, it experiences, but it does not experience ordinary linear time. The Hadith literature describes the soul in barzakh as being aware of events across different temporal periods. The dead perceive the living. They perceive events that to the living appear to be in the future. They exist in a temporal modality fundamentally different from the waking experience of the living. But the Sufi philosophers, particularly Ibn Arabi, gave barzakh a much deeper and more universal meaning. For Ibn Arabi, barzakh is not merely the realm of the dead. It is the ontological level between the purely spiritual and the purely material. It is the realm of imagination, alam al-mithal, the imaginal world, not imaginary, imaginal. A real realm ontologically intermediate between the spiritual and the physical, in which forms exist but not as physical matter, as images, as patterns, as informational structures that are more real than physical objects because they are closer to the divine source. And in this imaginal realm, time operates differently from ordinary physical time. In barzakh, past, present and future coexist. Events from different historical periods are simultaneously present and simultaneously accessible. The linear sequence of ordinary time is suspended. The soul in barzakh can perceive events from any point in history. The past is accessible. The future is accessible. The barriers that ordinary time imposes between moments are dissolved. This is not metaphor in the Sufi understanding. This is phenomenological report from practitioners who claim to have accessed barzakh through disciplined contemplative practice. Ibn Arabi's barzakh is structurally identical to the block universe experienced from a perspective that is not constrained by the thermodynamic arrow. In the block universe, all moments exist simultaneously. The thermodynamic arrow creates the experience of temporal sequence for beings embedded in physical systems with increasing entropy. Remove the thermodynamic arrow which death might accomplish if consciousness is no longer bound to a physical brain generating entropy, and the block is experienced as barzakh. All moments present, all events accessible, linear time dissolved. The structural parallel is precise. The block universe is barzakh, described in the language of mathematical physics. Barzakh is the block universe, described in the language of spiritual phenomenology. The Sufi concept of waqt, the mystical present moment, deepens this further. For the Sufis, waqt is not a moment in time, not a tick of the clock, not a point on a timeline. Waqt is the eternal now, in which the mystic encounters divine reality directly. Abu Sa'id ibn Abil Khair, the great 11th century Sufi master, taught that the Sufi is Ibn al-Waqt, the child of the moment, living entirely in the present, not the present as opposed to past and future, the present that contains past and future, the present that is reality before temporal analysis divides it into before and after. Ibn Ata'Allah, the 13th century Egyptian Sufi master, wrote that the Sufi lives in Waqt, not the moving moment of ordinary experience that slides from now to now along the time axis. The eternal moment, the timeless moment, the moment in which past and future collapse into the immediate undivided presence of the divine. The great Sufi master Mansur al-Hallaj declared Ana al-Haq, which can be translated as I am the truth or I am the real. This declaration, made in a state of mystical absorption in which the ordinary sense of time and self had dissolved, was understood by the Sufis not as a claim of personal divinity, but as the voice of the eternal, now speaking through a human being who had transcended the illusion of temporal sequence. Al-Hallaj was not saying that his ego was God. He was saying that in the moment of mystical union, the temporal self dissolves and what remains is timeless awareness. The awareness that does not experience time as a flow because it is the ground within which the experience of temporal flow arises. Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet and Sufi mystic, expressed this understanding with extraordinary depth. Time, he taught, is not something external that carries us from birth to death like a river carrying a leaf. Time is a veil, a construction of the mind that separates us from the direct perception of eternity. When the veil is lifted, as it is in deep states of mystical absorption, the mystic perceives reality as it is, timeless, complete, all moments present, all events contained in the single eternal now that is the divine experience of the universe. Rumi wrote about love dissolving the boundaries of time, allowing the lover to perceive the beloved across all moments simultaneously. This is not poetic metaphor for Rumi. This is phenomenological description of an experience accessible through contemplative practice. Mystical Christianity converges on the same insight through its own tradition. Meister Eckhart, the 14th century Dominican mystic and one of the most profound contemplative thinkers in Western history, wrote that God creates the world now, this instant, not once in the distant past, now, always now, eternally now. The creation is not a historical event that happened 13.8 billion years ago and ended. The creation is the eternal act of divine consciousness manifesting as the world in the timeless present. Eckhart taught that in eternity, there is no before and after. Everything is present. The birth of Christ is happening now. The end of the world is happening now. All events are gathered in the eternal now of God's awareness. This is the block universe expressed in the language of 14th century Christian mysticism. All events coexisting, no temporal flow, everything now and always now. The anonymous 14th century English mystic who wrote The Cloud of Unknowing described contemplative practice as a method of entering a state beyond time. In the deepest contemplation, the practitioner transcends the temporal mind and enters what the author calls the sharp dart of longing love directed at God. In this state, the ordinary experience of past, present, and future dissolves. The practitioner exists in the eternal moment that is God's own mode of being. St. Augustine had already laid the philosophical groundwork centuries earlier in Book 11 of the Confessions, where he argued that past and future do not exist. Only the present exists. The past is present memory. The future is present expectation. And the present itself is a knife edge that has no duration. Time, Augustine concluded, exists only in the mind, not in external reality. This anticipates the block universe insight that temporal flow is observer-dependent, not a feature of reality itself. The Aboriginal Australian concept of the dreamtime provides a perspective from an entirely different cultural tradition that converges on the same insight with striking precision. The dreamtime in Aboriginal understanding is not the past. This is the crucial point that most Western accounts misrepresent. The dreamtime is not a historical period that ended when ordinary time began. The dreamtime is not once upon a time. The dreamtime is the eternal creative present that underlies all of temporal reality. The dreamtime is now, always now, perpetually now. The ancestral beings who shaped the land and created the species and established the law are not dead. They are not in the past. They are present, active, continuously creating reality in the dreamtime that coexists with and underlies ordinary time. The dreamtime is not behind us in the temporal sense. It is beneath us in the ontological sense. It is the deeper layer of reality that ordinary temporal experience rests upon. An Aboriginal elder walking through the landscape is simultaneously walking through the dreamtime. The landscape is not merely physical terrain. It is a map of the dreamtime. Every rock, every waterhole, every mountain is a manifestation of ancestral action that is still occurring. The sacred sites, songlines, and ceremonial places are locations where the dreamtime is especially close to ordinary time, where the eternal present bleeds through the veil of temporal sequence, where the barrier between the timeless depth and the temporal surface becomes thin enough to see through. Ceremony and ritual are technologies for accessing this deeper, timeless layer of reality, for stepping out of ordinary sequential time and into the eternal present of the dreamtime. The dreamtime is perhaps the closest indigenous analogue to the block universe. All events exist simultaneously. The past is not gone. The creation is not over. The ancestral actions that shaped reality are happening now. Always now. Not in a metaphorical sense. In a directly experienced sense that is transmitted through initiation, ceremony, and contemplative practice across at least 60,000 years of continuous cultural tradition. This makes it the oldest continuously held cosmological framework in human history. Older than Hinduism, older than any written text, older than agriculture, and it describes reality in terms that are structurally equivalent to what Einstein's physics demonstrated in the 20th century. All events coexisting in an eternal structure that the human experience of temporal flow merely moves through without affecting. Now, the convergences are remarkable, but I must be honest about the limits. The same caution applies here as applied to the convergences between quantum mechanics and the contemplative traditions in previous series. Structural similarity is not identity. Different traditions might arrive at similar descriptions of time for different reasons. The human mind might have a natural tendency to generate certain temporal intuitions during contemplative practice, regardless of whether those intuitions accurately describe physical reality. The convergence might reflect shared cognitive architecture rather than shared truth. Furthermore, the traditions contradict each other in specific and important ways. Hinduism says time is cyclical, recurring in vast cosmic cycles. Buddhism says time is empty without inherent existence. Islam says time is created by God and will end at the Day of Judgment. Aboriginal Australians say the dreamtime is eternal and uncreated. These are incompatible claims about the metaphysical status of time, even though they converge on the phenomenological claim that linear sequential time is not the deepest reality. And the contemplative methods are not identical to the scientific method. The meditator's direct experience of timelessness is a first-person datum. It might be an accurate perception of reality's timeless nature as the traditions claim, or it might be a neurological artifact of altered brain states in which the temporal processing circuits of the brain are suppressed. When the default mode network quiets and the sense of temporal sequence dissolves, the meditator might be perceiving a deeper reality, or the meditator might be experiencing a brain malfunction that feels profound, Without third-person verification, the first-person report alone cannot determine which interpretation is correct. But the convergence with physics is what makes the contemplative data more than subjective report. The traditions say time is not what it appears to be. Physics says the same thing. The traditions say the past is not gone and the future is not unborn. The block universe says the same thing. The traditions say the flow of time is a construction of the mind, not a feature of reality. The relativity of simultaneity and the time symmetry of the Schrödinger equation say the same thing. The traditions say the deepest reality is timeless. The block universe says the deepest description of the universe is a four-dimensional structure in which time is a dimension like space, not a flow. When two completely independent methods of investigation separated by thousands of years using entirely different methodologies arrive at the same structural description of the same phenomenon, the probability that both are wrong in the proves same way, by coincidence, decreases significantly. It does not drop to zero, but it drops, and it drops further with each additional independent tradition that converges on the same conclusion. Hinduism, with its cyclical kalpas and the timeless vision of Arjuna. Buddhism, with Nagarjuna's emptiness of time and Dogen's being time. Islam with Da and Barzakh and the Sufi Waqt. Aboriginal Australia, with the dreamtime's eternal creative present persisting for 60,000 years. Mystical Christianity with Meister Eckhart's eternal now, and Augustine's argument that time exists only in the mind. The Neoplatonic tradition with Plotinus teaching that time is the moving image of eternity. The Taoist tradition with the eternal Tao that exists before heaven and earth, timeless and inexhaustible. Indigenous American traditions with their cyclical time concepts and their understanding that the ancestors are present, not past. Tradition after tradition. Continent after continent. Millennium after millennium. All saying the same thing in different languages with different metaphysical frameworks through different contemplative methods. Time is not what ordinary experience says it is. The flow is not real. The depth is timeless. The past is not gone. The future is not unborn. And consciousness in its deepest nature is not bound by the temporal sequence that it appears to inhabit. The convergence matters for the reincarnation question because it affects the framework within which we interpret the evidence. If linear time is the correct framework, then reincarnation must be a process that moves consciousness forward along the time axis from one life to the next. If block universe time is the correct framework, then reincarnation is not a process in time at all. It is a structural relationship between lives that coexist in the four-dimensional block. If the contemplative traditions are correct, that the deepest reality is timeless, then reincarnation occurs in a dimension that is not temporal. Consciousness connects to different lives not by traveling through time, but by focusing on different locations in a timeless structure. This is what the Hindu tradition of Vedanta has always taught. The Atman does not travel through time from one body to another. The Atman is eternal, timeless, unchanging. It does not move. It does not go anywhere. What changes is the body. What changes is the experience. What changes is the window through which the timeless Atman observes the temporal world. Reincarnation in this framework is not a journey. It is a shift in perspective. The timeless consciousness that is the Atman focuses on different locations in the space-time block, different world lines, different lives, not sequentially, not one after another. Because one after another requires temporal sequence and the Atman is beyond temporal sequence. The Atman experiences all lives simultaneously from the timeless perspective of Turiya. The appearance of sequence, the feeling that this life comes after the last life and before the next life, is the temporal illusion that the block universe confirms and the contemplative traditions have always described. The Buddhist framework handles this differently, but arrives at a compatible conclusion. There is no Atman, no timeless self, but there is the Dharmadhatu, the field of reality, the totality of all phenomena. And this totality in the Mahayana Buddhist understanding is timeless, empty of temporal inherent existence. The individual lives that appear to succeed each other in temporal sequence are like waves on the ocean. Each wave arises and passes, but the ocean does not sequence the waves. The waves coexist in the ocean. The ocean is not temporal. The sequence is how the waves experience each other, not how the ocean experiences the waves. From the ocean's perspective, from the perspective of the Dharmadhatu, all waves are present, all lives are present. Reincarnation is not a process in time. It is a structural feature of the ocean. The physics and the traditions converge on a single, extraordinary possibility. That time as we experience it is a local phenomenon, a perspective, a way of engaging with a reality that is fundamentally timeless. That the block universe is not just a mathematical abstraction, but a genuine description of how reality is structured. That past, present, and future are distinctions made by consciousness, not distinctions in reality. And that consciousness in its fundamental nature exists outside the temporal framework that it itself generates, through its engagement with physical brains and physical bodies, embedded in the thermodynamic arrow. If this is correct, then the question that started this series, does reincarnation move forward or backward in time, is based on a false assumption. The assumption that time has a direction at the level where consciousness operates. The physics says it does not. The traditions say it does not. The block universe says all directions are equally real. And consciousness, if it is fundamental, might not be in time at all. It might be the timeless awareness within which time appears. The screen on which the movie of sequential experience plays. The screen does not move from one frame to the next. The screen contains all frames simultaneously. And when one frame ends and another begins from the screen's perspective, nothing has happened. All frames are present, all lives are present, all moments are now. We began with a comment, a question left beneath a video by someone whose name I do not know, but whose thinking cut through to the deepest structure of reality. The question was this: does reincarnation always move forward in time, or can you reincarnate into an earlier life in the block universe? 3 parts later we have the tools to answer, not with certainty, not with proof, but with the precision that the physics and the traditions and the evidence allow. The answer requires us to dismantle several assumptions that most people do not even realize they are making. Assumptions so deeply embedded in our experience of reality that they feel like facts rather than assumptions. Assumptions about time, about identity, about death, about karma, about what it means to be a conscious being in a physical universe. The first assumption is that time flows, that the present moment moves forward along a timeline from past to future, that now is a special moment that slides along the time axis carrying consciousness with it. Physics says this assumption is false. Special relativity eliminates absolute simultaneity. The block universe eliminates temporal flow. The Schrödinger equation eliminates the preferred direction of time at the fundamental level. Time does not flow. Time is a dimension. All moments exist. The experience of flow is the thermodynamic arrow generated by the increase of entropy. It is real as an experience. It is not real as a feature of fundamental physics. The second assumption is that consciousness is located at a single point in time, that you are here now and only here now, that your consciousness occupies this moment the way your body occupies this room, that you were conscious yesterday and you will be conscious tomorrow, but right now you are only conscious now. The block universe challenges this assumption. If all moments are equally real, then you at age 5 and you at age 50 and you at age 80 all exist. All are equally real. All are conscious at their respective locations in space-time. Your consciousness is not a point moving along a timeline. Your consciousness is distributed along your entire world line. Every moment of your life is a moment of consciousness. and all of those moments exist simultaneously in the block. The third assumption is that death is the end of consciousness, that when the brain stops functioning, consciousness ceases to exist, that the lights go out and nothing remains, that you were and then you are not, that death is annihilation. The block universe says something profoundly different. In the block universe, death is not the end of your world line. Death is the boundary of your world line. The endpoint exists in the block as a space-time coordinate, but so does every other point on your world line. Your birth exists at its coordinates. Your first day of school exists. Your wedding exists. Your last breath exists, all simultaneously, all equally real, all present in the four-dimensional structure. Death does not annihilate your conscious moments. Death defines the temporal boundary of a particular set of conscious moments within a particular world line. The moments themselves remain, real, existing, present in space-time. You, at age 20, is not destroyed by your death at age 80. You, at age 20, exists at its space-time coordinates as really and as permanently as any physical fact in the universe. The block does not erase points. The block contains all points. Your life is not a candle that burns and then goes out. Your life is a sculpture in 4 dimensions, a shape in space-time. Death is one end of the shape. Birth is the other end. Both ends exist. The entire shape exists. Nothing is lost. Nothing is destroyed. The shape is eternal in the block. Every moment of joy you ever experience still exists. Every moment of love, every moment of insight, every moment of awareness, all there, all real, all now. This does not necessarily mean that consciousness survives death in the sense that personal subjective experience continues after the final moment of the world line. The block universe tells us that the moments continue to exist. It does not tell us whether there is an experiencer who moves from the final moment of one world line to the first moment of another. That is the reincarnation question, and the answer to that question depends on whether consciousness is produced by the brain or is fundamental to reality. The fourth assumption is the deepest and the most consequential, the assumption that your consciousness is yours, that it belongs to your particular brain and your particular body and your particular world line, that the awareness reading these words is a private individual possession generated by the specific neural configuration inside your skull, that my consciousness is mine and your consciousness is yours and they are fundamentally separate. Every contemplative tradition challenges this assumption. Hinduism says Atman is Brahman. Your individual consciousness is the universal consciousness experiencing itself through a particular body-mind. Buddhism says there is no Atman, no individual self. Consciousness is a process, not a possession. A river, not a lake. Islam says the ruh comes from God and returns to God. It was never yours. It was always God's breath animating a temporary form. The Sufis say, Ana al-Haq, I am the real. Not, my ego is God. The real is what remains when the illusion of individual separate consciousness dissolves, and quantum mechanics increasingly supports this view. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, as the measurement problem suggests and as Orchor proposes and as IIT's mathematical framework implies, then consciousness is not a private possession of individual brains. Consciousness is a feature of the universe. Individual brains do not produce separate private consciousnesses. Individual brains filter, focus, and localize a universal consciousness into the narrow beam of individual experience. Your consciousness is not yours in the same way that the light coming through your window is not yours. The light exists independent of the window. The window shapes it, focuses it, directs it, but the light is not produced by the window. And if you break the window, the light is not destroyed. It simply stops being filtered through that particular opening. Now, apply all of this to reincarnation. In the standard model of reincarnation, consciousness transfers from one body to another through time. Person A dies. The consciousness or soul or information pattern of person A travels forward through time and becomes associated with person B, who is born later. This is a linear, temporal process. It assumes the flow of time. It assumes the arrow of time. It assumes that consciousness moves from one point in time to a later point in time. In the block universe model of reincarnation, the picture is fundamentally different. All lives exist simultaneously. Person A's world line exists at one set of space-time coordinates. Person B's world line exists at another set. Both are real. Both are present. Both are conscious at their respective locations in the block. The relationship between them is not temporal transfer. It is quantum correlation, informational connection, structural relationship within the four-dimensional block. The consciousness pattern associated with person A and the consciousness pattern associated with person B are correlated, entangled, connected across the time dimension of space-time in the same way that entangled particles are connected across the spatial dimensions. And here is the critical insight. Quantum entanglement does not respect the arrow of time. Entangled particles are correlated regardless of when their entanglement is measured. The delayed choice quantum eraser shows that correlations can be established retroactively. The two-state vector formalism shows that future boundary conditions affect past quantum states. Wheeler's delayed choice experiment shows that present measurements influence past physical reality. If the connection between lives is quantum correlation, then the connection does not need to follow the thermodynamic arrow. Person B does not need to come after person A in time. Person B could come before person A, or person B could exist at any point in space-time. The quantum correlation connects them regardless of temporal ordering because quantum correlations are not bound by the emergent thermodynamic arrow. This dissolves the original question. The question asked whether reincarnation can move backward in time. The block universe answer is that the question presupposes a framework forward versus backward that does not apply at the fundamental level. In the block universe, there is no forward and backward for quantum correlations. There is only connection, structural relationship, informational resonance between different locations in the four-dimensional block. The thermodynamic arrow creates the appearance of direction, but the quantum level at which consciousness might operate has no arrow. The connection between lives is not directional. It is topological, a feature of the structure of the block itself. Now, we must confront the most radical implication. What happens to karma in a universe without linear time? Karma, in its traditional formulation across every tradition that teaches it, is a temporal principle. Actions in this life produce consequences in the next life. The Sanskrit root kri means to do or to act. Karma is action and the consequences of action. In Hinduism, karma operates across the cycle of samsara. Good actions, sattvic karma, lead to favorable rebirth. Higher realms, better circumstances. Greater wisdom. Harmful actions, tamasic karma, lead to painful rebirth. Lower realms, difficult circumstances, greater ignorance. The mechanism assumes temporal sequence. You act now. The consequences manifest later, in the next life, or the life after that. But always later, always in the future, cause precedes effect. The karmic seed br is planted now and ripens later. Buddhism refined the concept with characteristic precision. Karma, in Buddhism, is intentional action. Cetana, the Buddha said it is intention that I call karma. Not the physical act alone, but the mental state behind it determines the karmic consequence. And the consequence is not reward or punishment from an external judge. The consequence is the natural result of the action on the consciousness stream. Hatred produces a consciousness stream prone to suffering. Compassion produces a consciousness stream prone to well-being. Like planting apple seeds produces apple trees, not because someone decided apple seeds should produce apple trees, but because it is the nature of apple seeds to produce apple trees. Karma is natural law, not divine justice, not cosmic punishment. Natural consequence operating through the consciousness stream across lifetimes. Islam frames the principle differently, but preserves the temporal structure. Every action is recorded. The angel on the right shoulder records good deeds. The angel on the left records transgressions. On the day of judgment, the record is weighed. The consequences are administered. The temporal sequence is even more explicit than in Hinduism or Buddhism. The entire system depends on actions happening first and consequences following later. In the block universe, karma cannot work this way. If all lives exist simultaneously, then there is no before and after for karma to operate through. If the connection between lives is quantum correlation rather than temporal causation, then the relationship between action and consequence is not a causal chain running forward through time. It is something else entirely. Something that requires a completely different way of thinking about the relationship between action and experience. Something that might be more subtle, more beautiful, and more just than the linear causal model. Here is one possibility. In the block universe, karma might be a structural constraint on which world lines can be quantumly correlated with which other world lines. Not all world lines are equally correlated. The correlations are not random. They're not arbitrary. They follow patterns determined by the informational content of the world lines themselves. These patterns are what the traditions call karma, a world line characterized by certain informational patterns, certain types of intentional actions, certain qualities of consciousness, is correlated with other world lines that share compatible informational resonance. Like attracts like, not through a causal mechanism operating through time, but through structural compatibility in the information space of the block. Think of it like a resonance phenomenon in acoustics. A tuning fork vibrating at 440 Hz will cause another 440 Hz tuning fork across the room to vibrate sympathetically. Not because one fork sends a signal through time to the other, not because one fork causes the other to vibrate through a temporal chain, because they share the same resonant frequency. They are structurally compatible. Their vibrational information matches. The resonance is instantaneous. It does not travel through time. It exists because of structural compatibility between two systems. In the block universe, world lines that share informational resonance are correlated across space-time. A world line characterized by deep compassion produces a specific informational signature. Other world lines characterized by similar qualities of consciousness produce compatible signatures. These world lines are correlated in the block, connected, entangled, not because actions in one life cause consequences in another through time. Because the informational structures of the world lines resonate with each other, the correlation exists in the structure of the block itself, the way the resonance between tuning forks exists in the physics of vibration. It does not require a temporal mechanism. It does not require a causal chain. It requires only structural compatibility. The correlation is not caused by actions in one life, affecting another life through time. The correlation exists because the informational structure of the two world lines is compatible, resonant, matched. This reframes karma as a structural principle rather than a temporal one. Karma is not a force that carries consequences from past to future through time. Karma is a pattern of resonance that connects world lines across the timeless structure of the block. Actions matter not because they cause future consequences through a causal chain, but because they define the informational pattern of the world line. And the informational pattern determines which other world lines are correlated with it. A world line characterized by compassion is resonant with other world lines characterized by compassion. A world line characterized by cruelty is resonant with other world lines characterized by cruelty. Not because compassion causes good rebirth through time, because compassion creates an informational pattern that resonates with other patterns of similar quality. The connection is structural, topological, informational, not temporal. This is speculative. I must be clear about that. There is no experiment that confirms this specific model of karma. There is no equation that derives resonance-based karma from first principles. This is a conceptual framework that combines the block universe with quantum correlation with the traditional concept of karma in a way that is consistent with the physics, but not derived from the physics. The physics provides the structure, the traditions provide the principle. The combination is a hypothesis, not a proof, but it is a hypothesis that dissolves several problems that plague the standard model of karma, the problem of backward causation. If reincarnation can move backward in time as the block universe allows, then how can actions in a later life cause consequences in an earlier life? In the resonance model, there is no backward causation because there is no causation through time at all. There is only structural resonance between world lines. Direction is irrelevant. The problem of the mechanism. How does karma physically work? What carries the karmic information from one life to the next? In the resonance model, there is no carrier because there is no transfer. The correlation exists in the structure of the block itself. The way entangled particles are correlated without any signal passing between them. World lines are correlated without any information passing between them through time. The correlation is non-local, atemporal, built into the fabric of space-time, and this connects to the deepest insight of the contemplative traditions. The insight that consciousness in its fundamental nature is not individual, not separate, not bound to a single world line. Consciousness is the block. Consciousness is the four-dimensional structure of space-time experienced from the inside. Individual lives are not separate consciousnesses inhabiting separate bodies moving through time independently. Individual lives are focal points of the one consciousness, windows through which the block experiences itself from particular perspectives. When the Upanishads say Atman is Brahman, they are saying that the individual perspective is the universal consciousness looking through a particular window. When Buddhism says there is no self, it is saying that the window does not have an independent existence apart from the light that passes through it. When the Sufis say Ana al-Haq, they are saying that in the moment of deepest clarity, the window recognizes that it is not separate from the light. The light is all there is. The windows are patterns in the light. In this framework, reincarnation is not consciousness traveling from one body to another through time. Reincarnation is the one consciousness looking through different windows. Some windows are located at space-time coordinates that the thermodynamic arrow calls the past. Some are at coordinates the arrow calls the future. Some are at coordinates the arrow calls the present. The consciousness does not travel between them. The consciousness is present at all of them simultaneously, because the consciousness is the block, and the block contains all coordinates. The experience of sequential reincarnation, the feeling that this life comes after the last life and before the next life, is the thermodynamic arrow, experienced from within a particular window. From inside the window, time appears to flow. The past appears to be behind. The future appears to be ahead. But from outside the window, from the perspective of the block itself, there is no flow. No before and after, no forward and backward, only the structure, only the pattern, only the light passing through all windows simultaneously. This is what the Hindu tradition calls Turiya, the fourth state, the witness consciousness that is present in waking and dreaming and deep sleep as the unchanging ground. Turiya does not experience time because Turiya is not in time. Turiya is the consciousness of the block itself, the awareness within which all moments exist. All lives exist. All experiences exist. Turiya is not a state you achieve through spiritual practice. Turiya is what you already are, what you have always been, what you will always be. The practice is not achieving Turiya. The practice is recognizing that you are already Turiya, that the window never was separate from the light. This is what Dogen meant when he said that firewood does not become ash. From the perspective of Turiya, from the perspective of the block, from the perspective of the one consciousness, that looks through all windows, there is no becoming. There is only being. Firewood is. Ash is. You in this life are. You in the previous life are. You in the next life are. Not were, not will be, are. All present tense, because in the block there is only present. Or rather, there is no tense at all. Tense is a feature of language, not a feature of reality. Now, the honest accounting. I have presented a framework that combines the block universe of special and general relativity with the time symmetry of quantum mechanics, with the quantum consciousness theories from the previous series, with the contemplative traditions of humanity, and with the empirical evidence from reincarnation research. The framework is coherent. It is consistent with established physics. It is compatible with the contemplative data. It provides answers to questions that the standard model of reincarnation cannot answer. It dissolves problems that have plagued the philosophy of time and consciousness for centuries, but it is not proven. And I must be precise about what is established and what is speculative. What is established? Time dilation is measured and confirmed by experiment with atomic clocks, aircraft, satellites, particle accelerators, and the GPS system that operates daily on the basis of relativistic corrections. The relativity of simultaneity follows mathematically from special relativity and is confirmed by every experimental test of the Lorentz transformations. The block universe is the standard interpretation of Minkowski spacetime and the mathematical framework within which general relativity is formulated. The Schrödinger equation is time symmetric. This is a mathematical fact derivable from the equation itself, not an interpretation. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiments are confirmed by multiple independent laboratories at the University of Maryland and elsewhere. Wheeler's delayed choice experiment has been confirmed both in terrestrial laboratories by Jacques et al. In 2007, published in Science, and in the cosmic delayed choice experiment using quasar light. Aharonov's two-state vector formalism makes correct predictions, confirmed by weak measurement experiments published in Science and Nature Communications. Quantum biology confirms quantum coherence in the FMO, photosynthetic complex quantum entanglement in avian cryptochrome proteins, and quantum tunneling in enzyme catalysis, all at biological temperatures. The OR model developed by Penrose and Hameroff provides a specific, testable framework connecting quantum gravity to consciousness through microtubule dynamics, with quantitative predictions matching the 40 Hz gamma oscillation. The reincarnation cases investigated by Ian Stevenson over 40 years at the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies include over 2,500 cases with verified details, birthmarks corresponding to fatal wounds in previous personalities, knowledge of names, places, and events that were confirmed through independent investigation. Jim Tucker continued this work and published it in peer-reviewed journals. The cases resist conventional explanation. The contemplative traditions across Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Sufism, Christianity, Aboriginal, Australia, Taoism, and others independently describe time as illusory or constructed, and consciousness as fundamental and in some sense timeless. Additionally, the near-death experience literature provides evidence directly relevant to the block universe framework. Patients who experience cardiac arrest and are resuscitated sometimes report experiences that include temporal anomalies, panoramic life reviews, in which the entire life is perceived simultaneously rather than sequentially, perception of events that to the living appear to be in the future, the sense of existing outside of time altogether in an eternal present that contains all moments. These reports are consistent with what the block universe predicts consciousness would experience if it were temporarily freed from the thermodynamic constraints of a functioning brain generating entropy. The brain normally forces consciousness into the narrow channel of sequential temporal experience. When the brain's activity ceases during cardiac arrest, the temporal filtering might break down and consciousness might briefly experience the block as it is. All moments present, no sequence, no flow. The life review is the block experience from outside the thermodynamic arrow. This is speculative, but it is consistent with both the physics and the phenomenological reports. What is speculative? The claim that consciousness is quantum information operating at the level of microtubules in the specific way Ochoa proposes. The claim that quantum correlations connect different world lines across the time dimension of space-time. The claim that reincarnation operates through quantum entanglement rather than temporal transfer. The claim that karma is a resonance principle rather than a causal chain. The claim that individual consciousness is a focal point of universal consciousness experiencing the block from a particular perspective. Each of these claims is consistent with established physics, but not derived from it. Each goes beyond what the current evidence proves. Each requires further theoretical development and experimental testing before it can be accepted or rejected. The gap between what is established and what is speculative is real, and I will not pretend otherwise. The established physics provides a framework in which the speculative claims are possible. It does not provide a framework in which they are necessary. The block universe allows non-temporal reincarnation. It does not require it. Quantum time symmetry allows backward propagation of consciousness information. It does not demonstrate it. The convergence between physics and the contemplative traditions suggests that both are describing the same underlying reality. It does not prove it. Suggestion is not proof. Possibility is not actuality. Consistency is not confirmation. But possibility matters, because for most people, the question of whether reincarnation can move backward in time is not even a coherent question. Most people assume that time flows forward, that the past is gone, that the future is unborn, and that any claim of backward in time reincarnation is obvious nonsense, ruled out by basic physics. What we have shown in this series is that this assumption is wrong. Basic physics does not rule out backward in time processes. Basic physics says that time has no preferred direction at the fundamental level. Basic physics says that the past is as real as the present. Basic physics says that the arrow of time is emergent, not fundamental. Basic physics says that quantum correlations do not respect temporal ordering. The question is not nonsense. The question is physics. And the traditions add something that physics alone cannot provide. The first-person testimony of thousands of practitioners across thousands of years who report direct experience of the timelessness that the block universe describes mathematically. Who report that in the deepest states of contemplative absorption, the flow of time stops, the past and future become present. The boundaries between moments dissolve, and what remains is an awareness that is not in time, but contains time. An awareness that is not moving through the block, but is the block experiencing itself. This convergence between third-person physics and first-person contemplation is the most important feature of this investigation, because it suggests that we are not merely building mathematical models of reality. We are also accessing reality directly through consciousness itself, and the two methods of access are describing the same structure. A structure in which time is not what it appears to be. A structure in which consciousness is not what it appears to be. A structure in which the relationship between consciousness and time is far deeper, far more intimate, far more mysterious than the simple picture of a consciousness stream, flowing forward through a sequence of moments from birth to death. Let me return to the comment that started this. The question was whether reincarnation can move backward in time in the block universe. The answer in stages. Can quantum information propagate backward in time? Yes. The Schrödinger equation is time symmetric. The transactional interpretation treats backward propagation as physically real. The two-state vector formalism requires future boundary conditions to determine present quantum states. Experimentally confirmed. Does the block universe allow consciousness to be associated with space-time coordinates in the past? Yes. In the block universe, all space-time coordinates exist simultaneously. Past coordinates are as real as present coordinates. If consciousness can be associated with neural systems at present coordinates, there is no physical principle that prevents association with neural systems at past coordinates. Does reincarnation have to move forward in time? No. The thermodynamic arrow of time is emergent, not fundamental. At the quantum level where consciousness might operate, there is no preferred direction. Quantum correlations between world lines do not respect the thermodynamic arrow. The connection between lives, if it exists, operates outside the framework of temporal direction. But there is a deeper answer, the deepest answer. In the block universe, the question of forward versus backward might be the wrong question entirely. The block has no preferred direction. But more than that, the block has no flow. And without flow, the very concept of moving from one life to another collapses. Consciousness does not move from life A to life B. Consciousness is present at both A and B simultaneously. Always. Eternally. Not because consciousness traveled from A to B, because consciousness is the structure within which A and B both exist. Consciousness is the block. The block is consciousness. Individual lives are perspectives that consciousness has of itself, and perspectives do not travel. Perspectives exist, all of them, all at once, all now. In the eternal present that Einstein glimpsed in his equations, and the contemplatives glimpsed in their silence, and you glimpse in every moment that you are fully present. Every moment that the noise falls away and you are simply aware. Simply here, simply now, not going anywhere, not coming from anywhere. Just this, just awareness, just the light. The comment asked if you can reincarnate into an earlier life. The answer is that in the deepest understanding of the block universe, the word earlier has no meaning at the level where consciousness operates. Earlier is a thermodynamic concept, a statistical concept, an emergent concept. At the fundamental level where the laws of physics are written and where consciousness might have its deepest roots, there is no earlier and no later. There is only the structure, only the pattern, only the eternal present in which all lives, all moments, all experiences exist simultaneously. Reincarnation in the block universe is not a journey through time. It is a pattern in eternity, and eternity does not have a direction. The question that started this series has been answered, but the answer, as is always the case when we push to the deepest level, has opened questions that are larger than the one we started with. Questions about the nature of consciousness itself, about its relationship to space-time, about its relationship to quantum mechanics, about whether the mathematical structure of physics and the phenomenological reports of the contemplatives are two descriptions of the same reality or two beautiful illusions that happen to rhyme. These questions will define the next century of science, and the next century of spiritual inquiry, and the next century of human self-understanding. They are not questions that any single series can answer. They are questions that require the combined effort of physics and neuroscience and philosophy and contemplative practice working together with mutual respect and shared humility. Because the mystery is deeper than any single discipline, and the consciousness that asks the question is the same consciousness that is the answer. This series began with a comment from a viewer. It ends with an invitation. Look at the evidence, consider the physics, listen to the traditions, and then sit quietly and investigate for yourself. Investigate the awareness that is reading these words right now. Investigate the consciousness that is wondering about its own nature and its relationship to time. Is it flowing through time, or is time flowing through it? Is it moving from past to future like a boat on a river, or is it the river itself? Or is it the ocean in which all rivers exist simultaneously? The great contemplatives across every tradition report that when the mind becomes sufficiently still, when the noise of ordinary thinking falls away, when the compulsive narration of past and future ceases, what remains is not emptiness. What remains is awareness, pure, clear, luminous, and timeless. Not timeless in the sense of lasting forever, timeless in the sense of not being in time at all, present to all moments simultaneously, containing all moments without being contained by any of them. This is Turiya, this is Rigpa, this is Waqt, this is the eternal now. This is what Einstein saw in his equations, and what the contemplatives see when they close their eyes and look within. Whether this timeless awareness is a real feature of the universe as both physics and the traditions suggest, or a beautiful illusion generated by altered brain states is the deepest open question in science and philosophy today. No one has settled it. No one may settle it in our lifetimes. But the evidence from both directions, from outside through physics and from inside through contemplation, is pointing in the same direction, toward a reality in which consciousness is fundamental, time is emergent, and the relationship between the two is the key to understanding everything. The investigation is not academic. It is not something that happens only in laboratories and meditation halls and philosophy seminars. It is personal, immediate, urgent. It is happening right now. In you, in the awareness behind your eyes, in the consciousness that heard this question and recognized it as important. That consciousness, the one that is listening right now, is the very consciousness we have been investigating. It is not separate from the subject of this inquiry. It is the subject. The investigator and the investigated are one. The question and the answer are one. The seeker and what is sought are one. And that might be the deepest truth the block universe reveals. Not just that all moments coexist, not just that time has no preferred direction, not just that consciousness might operate outside the thermodynamic arrow, but that the consciousness investigating time and the time being investigated are not two things. They are one reality, one structure, one block, experienced from the inside as awareness, described from the outside as space-time. And both descriptions, the inner and the outer, the contemplative and the mathematical, are true. Both are accurate. Both are incomplete. And together they point towards something that neither can capture alone. The investigation continues. In the physics departments and the meditation halls, in the equations and the silence, in the experiments and the contemplation. In every discipline that has the courage to ask the deepest questions and the humility to accept that the answers might not fit the frameworks we already have. And in you, now, always now,